This podcast is made possible by Avalara.
Hello, this is Jason Quinn, CFO of Vendor. You're listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 941.
Nobody knows for sure exactly how this all plays out in the Office of Finance in particular, or even more broadly in the organization. We certainly know that AI will play an important role in the future. I could say even from my own team, as I think about the tech stack, I also think about the skill set. And certainly I think we're all listening and learning and trying to learn as much as we can to inform our opinions, because even the skill sets that might be required down the road, I think are going to look a lot different for finance teams than the traditional ones that we've had. And so we need to be willing to embrace that change that's coming.
Hello, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Melissa Howatson, CFO of Vena. When Melissa Howatson arrived in the corporate offices of Bend All Automotive in late 1999, she used the preferred door of entry for accountants far and wide, controllership. In the early 2000s, it seems auto parts manufacturer Bend All may have had traditional expectations for whoever filled the role of controller. In other words, strategic finance initiatives weren't necessarily on the menu. Nevertheless, Howatson tells us she satisfied her growing appetite for financial insight by tapping finance expertise that resided with professionals outside Bend All's existing accounting and finance functions. On today's episode, Melissa Howatson tells us how she built her own internal professional network to inform her finance strategic decision-making. We begin after this.
This episode is presented by Avalara. That's the sound of not worrying about sales tax compliance. Because when you automate it with Avalara, you don't have to worry about collecting sales tax or tracking who and what is tax exempt. With Avalara, you don't even have to worry about new tax laws and regulations. Avalara does it for you. If your business sells internationally, Avalara has you covered with cross-border tax compliance solutions. And when it comes time to file tax returns, Avalara automatically takes care of that too, giving you one less thing to worry about. Avalara has managed billions of sales for small, mid-size, and enterprise businesses, and seamlessly works with your current sales, e-commerce, and accounting platforms. Take the worry out of tax compliance with Avalara. Learn more at avalara.com. That's AVALARA.com.
Hello, we're speaking with Melissa Howatson, CFO of Vena. Melissa, welcome.
Thanks. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Melissa, we always begin by asking our guests to look back for us. And what we want you to do is zero in on some of those experiences for us that you feel help prepare you for a finance leadership role. What would come to mind for you?
There's probably three in particular that come up. I'd say the first one was I started in my early days with KPMG. I was working in the Waterloo office near Toronto, Canada. And I was working on clients across technology and manufacturing. And so I really got to see a bird's eye view of the inner workings of so many companies. In hindsight, I wish I'd paid a lot more attention to some of the details, getting to see things like some of their policies, org structures, etc. And while I was there, I had a partner and a senior manager who both really took me under their wing and gave me mentorship. I also got a chance to build up a great network of other finance professionals there, and many of them are still in my life today. And I got to start mentoring students while at KPMG, so started to get a little bit of a taste for leadership. My next one would have been when I was in the automotive industry. I worked for a company, Bend All Automotive. And there I worked with a president who was really in tune with people. he would walk the floors of all three of our factories every single day, all three shifts. And I always wondered how he did it and thought, gee, that's a lot of time he's spending doing this. But over time, I really came to appreciate the importance of staying close to people, knowing what's happening in the trenches and creating those connections. He was always very transparent with our employees, vendors, and customers, had an open door policy. And we did actually experience the collapse of the automotive industry while I was there. And those relationships and some of that trust and the building of those relationships really are what allowed us to survive and even thrive coming out of that, which I really learned there how a crisis really shows you what you're made of and how strong leadership can really come together and make a difference. And I'd say the third one would have been the time that I spent at D2L. That's an education technology company. And I went to work there because I knew a few leaders there from my KPMG days that I really respected and trusted, who had had great careers themselves. It was an opportunity to join a mid-sized scaling company, which I love that size and space, and really help them to build for scale. And as they were thinking about IPO readiness, I had lots of focus on rebuilding processes, integrating systems, leveraging automations, and building tighter controls. And I really appreciated the importance of having that strong team around me. And we did eventually take the company public in 2021. So it was a great experience.
Wow, that's a nice overview for us. Thank you for that. I wanted to just zero in on some of the segues you made. When you first went into industry, was it more about the accounting? Was it a controllership?
It was a controller position, so primarily focused on accounting to start.
So as you get yourself established sort of in the minds of the corporate management as a controller, how do you acquire sort of your, more of your FP&A skills? And how do you do that? Because some folks get a little siloed in accounting.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I wouldn't say I was as deliberate about it as I would be now in hindsight, but it really was leaning in and working with the business, partnering across. We had a very strong engineering leader who was financially astute. And so leaning in with him to really understand how that side of the business worked, as well as working with our president and across our production team and our operations folks, really tightly building my own networks with them to help understand how some of those key inputs could help me to build financial plans and then vetting them back against the business. But really sort of had to learn that side of it myself as I was going.
You mentioned while you were at Bend All that the industry collapsed. And I think you're referring to that. Was it the financial crisis as well in tandem?
That did come shortly after. So yeah, we had the actual automotive industry where a couple of the big players were declaring bankruptcy. And then we did survive as well the financial crisis that came. Now it happened, the financial crisis came just as we were in the process of selling the company. So that was some other interesting things that it threw our way.
It seems like it was at D2L where you really climbed the ladder.
You arrived there more or less as a controller as well. And you made an investment of years there as well, 9.5 years nearly. Here's where I'm thinking as I look at this, I'm like, well, here's where she really found her stride. And again, I think you mentioned there were some people there who had the confidence in you as well, perhaps some mentors. But can you tell us a little bit more about, why it was an environment of success for you?
Yeah, so I think, after I'd left Bend All, I have stayed at places longer time. I'd been at Bend All a number of years, but wanted to get back into technology. I had spent a bit of time with some startups, which was great, but I found that I would get bored after a year or two of building and needed a little bit more to sink my teeth into. And I'd say when I went into D2L, it really was about that size and scale where we had resources to get things done, but not so many that everything was already built or that you had armies of people to come in and get things done. So you really had to roll up your sleeves, but be strategic. And I love those environments where you get to span wide like that. And so I think it was that, working alongside some of the other leaders, where we really just knew we were going to have to reimagine some of our processes, how we thought about people and how we were doing things to be ready for the next stage. So did a lot of things, connecting different core business foundational systems, creating some automations, building out the teams that we needed with the skill sets that we were going to need, and stepping up our controls. And so that it was just, I really enjoyed the work, and I think, it was hard work, but it was exciting to be able to just see the fruits as you would stand something new up and see how it was really going to let you scale without needing to add a lot more people to get to the next stage.
This is a question we always like to ask, and it might have happened at D2L. I think it might have, just given the investment of years you were there and the growth you experienced. There was a time where someone tapped you on the shoulder and you were tasked with presenting to a senior group of people. It might have been management. It might have been board members. I'm sure there were a lot of firsts, but this one sticks out in your mind. You might have been much more junior and it was just a group of partners back at KPMG. I don't know. But you had to step up and present, and it was a nervous environment. Does anything come to mind? Am I drawing something from your past, or are they all just sort of one large mosaic at this point? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, probably something when I was working in automotive where we were, we'd have to present typically to our bank, et cetera. But when we were looking to sell the company and we were preparing packages and presenting to who eventually became the buyer, that was when I realized that I probably hadn't been practicing those skill sets quite as much, and that our CEO was covering a lot of that, or CEO and president, and really did appreciate that chance. It was also a time there weren't a lot of females leadership. And so it happened to be with the bankers and the group that we had. I was one of the only females in the room presenting as well. And so I don't know, that made me possibly a little bit more nervous about it. But I think what helped me was lots of preparation as we were pulling the materials together, and having the confidence of the team around me, in particular my CEO, but even the other leaders that were around me, that I knew my stuff. I was confident in the subject matter we were talking about, and I had the answers to the questions. And if there was a surprise to come up, I could either find that answer later, or I knew there'd be others in the room that together we would get through it. But everyone wanted to see me succeed, so that helped a lot.
Well, Melissa, we may have some other career-related questions for you a little later in the podcast, but right now, let's find out about Vena. Tell us about this company. What does it do? What's it all about?
Absolutely. So Vena is an intelligent platform for complete planning. And what's unique about it is that it's natively integrated with Microsoft 365. We serve over 1,500 customers, and they range from SMB to enterprise across a wide variety of industries. And finance and business professionals are main users of the system. They use it for really 3 different areas. The first would be finance-led planning. Think of your traditional budgeting and forecasting, your what-if analysis, or your finance and business reporting. We also do extended planning. So think there, cash flow planning, workforce planning, or your sales and operational planning. And then we have a third category, which we call beyond planning, which would be things like account reconciliations, incentive compensation management. So starts with FP&A, but then can go broader than that. And I would say the value prop is really about helping companies plan to grow through anything. And I think that's really relevant if you think about the current macroeconomic environment that we're in. There's lots of what if scenarios, or having to think about different ways to plan your business. And that's really where Vena plays. I think what makes us different is that a lot of other systems in our space try to get finance to move away from Excel, and we embrace Excel. So we look at Excel, we work very closely with it, closely integrated, and then we enhance it with our own powerful multidimensional data model. And so we take all the goodness that Excel has, but then we're able to add to that and drive even more ability for finance. And so I think what that does is it makes it a more intuitive system, because people get to stay within the systems they know and love within Excel. In fact, more than 80% of companies that move away from Excel move back to Excel. And so we're just there right from the beginning, which I think is great and very flexible. And really, that's what drew me to Vena. I really do believe that the Office of Finance can be a more strategic value driver. But what we need to do that is we need to get out of the day-to-day manual tasks to free up time for more strategic thinking, value-added insight, business partnering, running more scenarios. And so a solution like Vena really does help an office like Office of Finance do exactly that.
Just for this audience in particular, we always like to ask if you could supply us with an abbreviated history of Vena's capital structure. What stage are we?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of rounds, raised about 350 million to date, and we've got some really impressive investors along the way: Centena, JMI, and most recently, which was a round that we did a couple of years ago, we brought Vista equity into the portfolio. So we've got some really, really accomplished investors part of the company.
Now you step into the role in more than a year ago, I believe. But can you share with us what is the chapter that you hope to help open for this company?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned earlier, I really do like companies that are in that scaling phase. And that's really what I've come into Vena to help do. We're at just over 700 employees. We have a sizable revenue base now. We're certainly well past a startup, almost passing that scale up stage where we've got our sights now set on, we've got proof points that we can grow the company, but we need to look at ways to do it efficiently, which is where that scale really comes in. And so building out some of our processes, looking at our tech stack and how that works, and being able to scale to the next level. There's just certain things, the way that we did things to date, that aren't going to be what carry us through this next stage. And for me, that's the really exciting stuff as we sort of rethink some of those different ways we do things across the whole business.
That's interesting, because this next question we always like to ask regarding lines of sight, for someone like yourself who steps into the role and you take a look at the numbers that come to you regularly. So we know it's the unit economics and renewable revenues and what have you, and lifetime customer value, what have you. But we're wondering, when you stepped into the role, maybe there was a metric that you thought the organization needed to pay closer attention to, or maybe there was just a part of the organization that you felt they really need to be better educated as to why this matters. I don't know. I'm just lining up scenarios for you. But as a finance leader, are there certain metrics that you have sought to help raise the profile of, or help the organization sort of get in step with?
Yeah, so I think we had some strong metrics already in place, given the type of company we are. You mentioned many of the traditional ones. I'd say the timing of when I joined was interesting, because we have that broader uncertainty that's going on around us. And so companies everywhere are looking at efficiency, and, that where are you going to spend money? How much are you going to grow? How certain are you about those growth rates, where you have more certainty about what you're doing with your cost structure? And so I certainly have worked in terms of educating across the business. Using Rule of 40 would be the one that I've leaned into probably more than was being done previously by the company, in terms of helping people understand that trade-off between investment and growth versus efficiency, and how we're thinking about that. Like most other companies, we've certainly pivoted towards stronger efficiency while still being a growth-oriented company, given that we see lots of opportunity to grow right now. But that's been really then unpacking what that means for the business and helping them understand the trade-offs between all the different lines below that you've got below, and prioritizing, thinking about focusing more, and really driving some of those trade-off conversations. We can do that, but it means we have to do less of something else. And so that's just been a useful way I've found to help drive those conversations and help people understand the natural trade-offs that are needed.
What about the finance organization? Have you reorganized that in some fashion, redeployed certain people, or made certain responsibilities wider or narrower?
So I'd say that a lot of it, we had a really strong team in place, but what I'd say we focused on two areas where we're really doubling down. One is enhancing our ability to do finance business partnership. I speak about what our own Vena tool can help to simplify, which is as we try to look for those opportunities to reduce manual tasks and free up our own time and really create those tighter alliances between my team and other parts of the business to really deserve a seat at the table, the leaders of the areas of the business that we are working with. And that's really started to really catch its stride even more so than was previously there, where we're called on more than ever for advice when people are making some business decisions, to weigh in on what we think, because we get to sit there and see so much across the business. So certainly elevated that finance business partnership. And then the other piece has been about owning our time and really prioritizing where we're going to spend it. And because that's how we're going to find ourselves the time. You have your routine things that are going to drown you every day if you let them. And so really trying to streamline so that we can work on the broader tech stack and where are we going to find automations or ways to eliminate our time spent on manual stuff so that we can focus on more value add.
Melissa, I thought it was interesting when your opening statements regarding Vena, you mentioned Microsoft 360, and I've seen floating around on LinkedIn, what have you, you participating in different events with Microsoft folks. Is this, are you part of driving this sort of strategic alignment that I think you described?
Certainly. So yes, we do work really closely with Microsoft. And so even within our own team, getting to see some of the new things that are coming out there, that's exciting. So certainly we're thinking about how we streamline for us, both within the Microsoft tech stack, but even more broadly across the organization, and also where new technology can help us to reduce manual time that's being spent. So certainly I'm part of that tech steering committee within. And as we look at how do we start picking the right systems and then building them so that they're talking and that we can have information flowing accurately between them.
So it looks like you have a real willingness
as a finance leader to participate and make yourself available to events or forums or venues that sort of reveal the strategic positioning of Vena or the company.
Yeah, and actually that was something that really interested me in taking on this role with the company. As I mentioned, I'm super passionate about the space we play in, the strategic office of finance and what it can do for a business. And so having that opportunity to help communicate that, to network across a broader set of finance professionals who are all looking to solve those challenges, working across with our partners at Microsoft in terms of what this means and how we can work together. Microsoft has made some really great investments in their technology stack. There's really exciting things coming out of there. And because we're so tightly coupled with that, there's a lot of benefit then that Vena can provide to our own customers in that. And so it has given me that chance to not only focus on building the inside best practice finance capabilities, but also to help the company with communicating that externally and working with our customers, hearing our customers, and helping make sure that our product is really driving the most value that we can outside. So it is a little different than your traditional finance role.
And of course, meanwhile, people talk about Microsoft today. We're talking about AI, we're talking about Microsoft Copilot very often. But when you think of your traditional AI stack and the sizable investment that's been made there, are you confident the applications that make up your existing finance stack is AI ready? And this is a question we've begun to pose to finance leaders because we're sure they're asking the same question. Are these applications going to step up and be enhanced as AI technologies get integrated and innovate the offerings?
So that's the $1 million question, I would say, that so many finance professionals are asking ourselves. I think what I can say is we're looking at that tech stack. We have partnered with some of the best in breed systems. We use Salesforce, for instance. Our HRIS that we use is ADP. NetSuite would be our ERP. And so certainly as we look across, we're trying to stay up to date with where they might be going or how they see AI playing. But certainly I'd say this has become front and center for finance teams as we look at what do we have, where's this going. We all feel a little uncertain that nobody knows for sure exactly how this all plays out in the office of finance in particular, or even more broadly in the organization. But we are certainly actively considering it for us. We certainly know for Vena, where we're going, and we certainly know that AI will play an important role in the future. I could say even from my own team, as I think about the tech stack, I also think about the skill set. And certainly I think we're all listening and learning and trying to learn as much as we can to inform our opinions, because even the skill sets that might be required down the road, I think are going to look a lot different for finance teams than the traditional ones that we've had. And so we need to be willing to embrace that change that's coming, to think differently about things, and I think the exciting thing about what AI is going to do is it is going to free us up to do more of the value add, or to take the information and apply our own judgment to it, or make sure that it's relevant. But we've got to be ready for it, because I do think we'll be doing a lot less of the routine finance things that we used to do in the past.
Okay. Well, I have one last question for you before we move to our finance strategic moment question. I want to, you're in the office on a given day. Maybe it's everyone's in on this particular day. It's post-COVID after all. You're walking down the hallway. There's a gathering of your FP&A folks in a particular conference room. Melissa swings open the door. What do they think Melissa's going to ask them about?
I'm probably going to ask them how it's going with partnering with the different parts of the organization, and if there's any help they need from me to help break down any barriers. I'm always looking to my team for identify for me what some of the barriers are in your way, and how can I help to minimize or eliminate those.
Blocking and tackling. We are up to our finance strategic moment question, where we're going to ask you just to choose one moment of insight that you've experienced along the way during your career, where you saw an opportunity or maybe a risk because of your lines of sight as a finance leader. You're able to see this. What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
So I mentioned earlier that I was in the automotive industry when that industry collapsed. And within a couple of months, our largest 3 customers that made up a very significant portion of our revenue had all gone bankrupt. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be that defining moment in my finance career where I was heading up the finance team in a company that went bankrupt. And what are we going to do to survive this? And we really had to do some unthinkable things in that moment. And I think for me, as I sat there and we tried to mobilize what are we going to do plan, it really, for me, crystallized that critical role that finance sits at the heart of so many different parts of the organization, and how you really need to be able to know what's happening in those parts of the organization and work to leverage, because we really needed any and all ideas in order to get through that. And we had to do a number of things. We had to change what we were doing with employees. We had to put them on 2 or 3 day a week schedules. We had to eliminate some employee benefits. We had to reach out to our vendors to see if we could get longer payment terms. We had to reach out to other customers that could still pay to see if they could pay us sooner. And so we really had to mobilize a plan that touched on all the stakeholders of the company. And I honestly, as we were getting into it, thought, okay, this isn't going to work. Asking these things, this just seems so unthinkable. And I was amazed at how much the different parties were willing to play ball and come along with us. And the company, it was tough times for sure, not easy. But during that time, a lot of other companies did not survive through that. There were many suppliers that did shutter their doors. it ended up eliminating some of what I'd say was waste that was happening within that industry. And the other side of that, you came out of that stronger companies with better aligned cost structures. There were fewer competitors. Your relations with your customers were able to be stronger. And I think I learned three big lessons in that time. One, that crisis really teaches you what you're made of, and that some of that impossible is actually possible if you ask and you push. But secondly, it's how you really do need to help mobilize the team across, and sitting in finance, having people understand why you need to ask for those different things and helping to coordinate the different parts in the business. And I'd say the third part that was like a real aha moment for me is that we had so much trust and transparency and built up so much goodwill with stakeholders. And that's what we were really leaning on so heavily in that moment. And you never know when you need them, but some of the things I used to think were maybe waste of time. We don't need to walk the floors every day, getting to know every employee. There's, other work that's screaming at us, or, maybe we could have played more hardball sometimes with vendors, etc. But in that moment, a lot of the things that I had believed to be true and sometimes wondered about what we were doing were paying off, because we had those relationships and that goodwill with those stakeholders that really define the difference between our company surviving through that and other companies that weren't as fortunate.
From episode 925, this is 1 Minute with Scott Benyon, CFO of Paystand.
I'm aware that there can potentially be IP issues with using certain generative AI to generate code. There can be confidentiality issues with generative AI dragging data from an organization into a data set that then gets exposed. So we're already moving fast to put an AI policy in place at the company. What I've done is, as I've heard about this, I've connected directly with the leadership in the product and engineering team to work together on how can we leverage this technology. It's not that we're going to prevent this technology from entering the four walls. It's a thing. It's going to happen. Let's make sure we do it in a smart way and we leverage it.
Melissa, we're entering the mentoring round where we're going to ask you to look back once again. We'd like you to look back to
D2L. When you first stepped into the CFO role there, after climbing the ranks really within that company, and think back to your first 60 days. There's got to be some piece of information you wish someone had given you. And here we're going to give you the opportunity to go back in time and give yourself that piece of information. What would it have been if you could have talked to your younger self that first 60 days you spent in that CFO role?
I'd say it's reminding yourself about prioritization. You get so hungry to do so much so quickly, but you can't do it all and be successful at the same time. And it's really about figuring out, what is in your A drawer as a priority. What are those other things that need to go in the B drawer, the C drawer, and to really just focus on doing a couple of things really well, focus on finishing them, and then moving on to the others. And I think that, when you do that, it allows you to get those wins. It allows you to show your team that things can change and what's possible, and get them motivated because they feel like they can stay focused and you're not distracting them with so many things, because you're always getting asked from other parts of the business, but you can't do them all.
Can you tell us, share something personal about yourself, Melissa, something most people might not know?
So I do like to travel, and I was fortunate that I did get to go and actually both work when I was at KPMG and live in Tasmania, Australia. A bit of an odd location, but was a great experience. And of course, I arrived there very keen, young student, ready to work really hard. And I remember when they picked me up at the airport, one of the things that they said right away is, okay, you're coming from North America, and I know over there that you live to work, but here we work to live, and you better get that right from the beginning. And it stuck with me for a long time, just keeping that balance in life and reminding myself that you've got to have that right balance.
Nice. Interesting. Thank you.
We'd like to ask if you have a book selection for us. Doesn't have to be a business book. Maybe it's something you escape with. Anything come to mind?
So there is one book that was recommended to me by another CFO that I've worked with, and took me a while to actually get around to reading it because it's a little long and a bit daunting. But once you read it, it does really become a helpful tool. And that's the High Growth Handbook by Eli Glee. It's really just got some simple practical tips of things to consider across the whole business. And so I still refer to it in different chapters of it from time to time when I'm questioning, how to think about doing things differently.
And we're up to our final question, where we ask you to look forward finally. For the next 12 months, we'd like to know what your priorities are as a CFO.
So I would say there's probably three. I mentioned the first one, just building for scale. We're at a sizable company. We do need to keep focusing on revisiting our processes, our technology, and our controls. I'd say the second one is that efficiency. As we all look for more efficiency in our business, I really do think it's about leaning into change management and communicating our why with employees, making sure that we take the time to bring the business along. And I'd say the third one is continuing to evolve our long-range plan. We've just recently gone through a refresh on our long-range plan, and I really do think that it's you can either put that on a shelf or you can keep it alive by keeping on tweaking and aligning it with your go-to-market plan, your strategic plans, your product roadmap, and pivoting as required. And so I'm excited to keep that work going.
Melissa Howatson, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.